Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Agile for Agilists Podcast, the series made by Agile enthusiasts for Agile enthusiasts. And now for your hosts, Drew Podwal and Brad Nelson.
I'm Andrew Clay Shafer, and I was soaking in Agile by early 2000s. So 2004, I was a software developer, and I won't go into the whole story. I told it before, but I was hanging out with Alistair Coburn, and I was into XP and all these other things, going to the Agile conferences, started speaking about Agile topics, and then magically DevOps was born right around. I met Patrick Dubois at the Agile conference in Toronto, which led to the parade of ideas that came from the community that formed around the term DevOps, and that's been pretty good to me and a bunch of other people since 2009, the first DevOps days. And I usually speak at 6 to 10 DevOps days a year, and have a bunch of interesting people that can help me solve interesting problems from that community. Oh, and then along the way, I was a co-founder of Puppet and built some stuff there. Then I ended up as a VP of engineering on an OpenStack startup that was eventually sold to EMC. And then I spent 5 years at Pivotal doing Cloud Foundry and Agile. Like Pivotal is probably the most pure kind of XP consulting in the enterprise for a while. And then I spent 5 years at Red Hat before I started Ergonautic with some of my friends to change the way the world delivers software, operates software. You know how it goes.
Love it. That is quite the list.
I was very fortunate. I feel very lucky to have lived the life I lived so far.
Yeah, I'm actually jealous listening to that list. So
We all are.
I spent too much of my time toiling in the trenches as a project manager. So,
I mean, there were some days that were more fun than other days. Let's just say that. But yeah, it's been a good ride, and hopefully it's not over for a while.
so what are you excited to talk about today?
So there's a lot of different things we could talk about, and we might end up in some of those rabbit holes along the way based on the conversation we already had. But I'm really excited, and what I've been talking a lot about lately in some of my own stuff is Sociotechnical Systems, which is a word you'll hear thrown around in some of the DevOpsy, platform engineering, observability conversations.
So let's start with that. Do you want to give us a brief definition of what that is?
So the brief definition is the observation that any organizational improvement that is trying to do something with technology can only be successful if it also accounts for the socio side. So that socio and technical are a single system, not two systems. So, I mean, depending on how you slice it, you could say they're interdependent systems, but it's really a single system that produces the output, produces the results.
We're not talking about the singularity.
No, not yet. But there is an interesting twist now because we're entering into this time when the technical side might have agency as well as the socio side does. So that will be the emergence of agentics will get interesting, but I'm not sure everyone's in that game yet.
So I admittedly was not familiar with that term before today, before you mentioned it, before we started recording, but it definitely seems to align, I think, a lot with my experience. And I think a lot of us in the Agile, I'll say consulting business would say that you're really not coaching technology or practices. It's really a people problem that we're trying to solve. And in my opinion, technology is all about people. If you're not building technology for someone, then why are you building it?
Well, I mean, the goal could be a lot of things, right? There's a lot of different missions. Profit is often a motive. There's other things that are not profit driven, but whether you're building it quote unquote for people or not, you're building it with people. right? So if you want to build it better,
Hmm.
you got to address that. And the thing that came up in our earlier conversation, and the thing that I believe is true, is we keep reinventing this stuff, right? And so the thing that's interesting to me about sociotechnical systems, which continues to have some interesting things in the literature, right? The academic side of it. But the term sociotechnical systems was actually born in the 1950s, studying the automation, the mechanization of coal mining in Britain. So Tris at the Tavistock Institute coins this term, studying the long wall mining as they try to mechanize the mines. And what he shows in his research is that there's this alternative to the bureaucratic Taylorism that's pervasive in most organizations, and that it's effectively this cross-functional empowered team will beat this like big shift-driven. Everyone's focused only on their task. There's all this automation, but everyone only sees like their part of the task. And so you have all of this turbulence and friction at the handoffs instead of having the cross-functional team that can solve problems. So in a perfect mathematical world, in an ideal coal mine, then this longwall mining would have been better. But in reality, there's all these anomalies in the way that the rocks are and the dynamite or whatever. And so if you don't have that ability to see the whole process and treat it holistically and have the right people at the right time, then it kind of breaks down. And the thing that's fascinating in this timeline, so 1950s, studying the coal mines, shows there's this new way, has all the data, it's more productive, better morale, better safety, and then they present it, and he's got all the same verbiage, right? So he in the 1950s is talking about the old paradigm, which is this bureaucratic, autocratic, authoritarian thing, and it's slow moving. And then this new paradigm is participative and all about innovation, right? Like that's the nomenclature from 1950s coal mining. It's like the same story as now, and he's got all the data, shows more productive, better safety, better morale, and then they take it, and guess what happens?
I'm guessing it didn't work out very well for them.
The directors of the mines did not want to empower the workers, and
Mm.
they did not they didn't care. There's all this data that it would be better, and they were fully intent on their centralized planning that they'd already worked out to mechanize the mines. And then another thing that happened, which is also funny when you start thinking about like DevOps or how people get paid to use Kubernetes, is they started paying people more for being specialized in on the tools, on the new machines. And so that fractured that socio system even further. And then it couldn't, and so like the bureaucratic authoritative thing just like replaced the innovation that happened at the Haymore mine that he was studying. And then it really got decimated in the transition to oil, because then the research was like, well, that's for coal mining, and now we're doing oil, so whatever.
We're special. We're different,
Yeah.
right? This is not going to work for us.
It reminds me of the whole like every generation doesn't want to work narrative that's been around forever.
But I feel like you see that same cycle when you go to pick one of the greats, right? So you have Deming, you have Akoff, you have Senghi, you have all these ideas from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then 2001 Agile. It's like, oh, it's new, but it's like literally the same ideas all the way back.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds you a little bit of Bell Labs in like the 20s. You had the Hawthorne studies, and then you had Stewart and Deming. But that even goes back to like, yeah, my wheels turn like Olds and Ford and Flanders with motion study and all of that, and early 1900s, late 1800s. But what was interesting to me about that is it got me thinking about craftsmanship. There was a time, I forget who it was. It was like Eli Whitney or something like that, that first made it so that we could standardize parts. And so they were interchangeable. Before that, everything was just crafted by hand.
Artisanal.
And so we went to this, yeah, yeah. And so like standardization is something that's really important to us in the industry today. It's huge, but we removed that craftsmanship to be able to deliver faster, essentially. It wasn't originally software, but it sounds like what you're talking about is the opposite argument of that, that standardizing takes away from the craftsmanship and the craftsmanship can beat the standardization. Is that what I'm hearing?
So I think this touches on a few ideas in some of the previous conversations where one of the things I see in a lot of attempts to implement agile is not necessarily leveling up the technical capabilities, right? Like everyone gets a little bit too focused on the socio maybe in some of the coaching. And that's one of the things that I gravitate towards in XP is like this focus on a little bit of the technical. So, but at the same time, I somewhat disagree that standardization means you get rid of craftsmanship. It just moves where the craftsmanship is, right? So I think you do need craftsmanship or pride of work and like human discernment involved in the work, but it's also inefficient to constantly be recreating everything from first principles and basic ideas. So there's a lot to be said for having standardized nuts and bolts, or having and like you get to software, there's this tension that's happening in a lot of organizations where, oh, we want to have developers be empowered and be productive, and so they can do whatever they want, but you're not necessarily accounting for all the variation that's creating. Going back to Shewart and control charts and all that kind of stuff, like all that variation is creating an ever increasing operational burden, an ever increasing attack surface in the name of this kind of like fleeting developer productivity that the standardization would like buy you a lot of leverage that you're not getting.
I want to take it back to one thing you said, though. Talking about how this is something that was talked about in the 50s and then was rediscovered and called Agile in the in 2000s. Like one of the quotes that I always loved is that we stand upon the shoulders of giants, right? And there was this video, like I don't know if this is the time where Lawrence Lessig started, talking about what is it called? I forget what it's called, but what's the open source copyright?
Copy left
is now.
Or GPL or
No, there's a I'll look it up, but anyhow, there's a video that came out around the time that I became aware of it.
Creative
I always felt like
Commons?
that was Creative Commons. That's what I was trying to think of. And there was a video that came out around that time that was called Everything's a Remix. And they talk about like the one thing that really resonated with me, because I was a drummer, or I'm a drummer, is there's what's called a breakbeat in drumming. I don't know if you guys are musicians at all, but a breakbeat is, and I'm going to do it with my mouth, so forgive me, but it's that common like tick tick tock tick 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 tock tick tick tock tick 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 tock tick 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 tock, right? And the thing is that the first time that was ever recorded was in a song called "The Amen Break," and I forget when it was recorded. I want to say 40s or 50s or something like that. And it's just been used in everything. Drummers have copied that drum beat, right? It's in so many different songs. Once hip hop and rap became, more prevalent, like it was sampled and sampled and sampled. And like there's no copyright on that pattern of drumming. You can't really copyright like a drum pattern, right? You can a guitar riff for some reason, but it was this video that really talked about like debating whether or not, if you build upon something else that already existed, or if you borrowed it and put it together with something else, like Is it new? Is it not new? How do we approach that and what do we call it? And all of these concepts, like one of the things I was thinking about also is Conway's Law. I don't know when Conway's Law was talked about, but
70s.
what I hear when you talk 70s,
70s.
right? What I hear is like when you think about sociotechnical systems, is a bit of Conway's Law, right? And so we keep on taking these things that we've learned before and exploring them again. Maybe we're repackaging them. Maybe some things aren't altered as much as others, right? But I do feel like the advantage that we have 20 years later is all the experience that led up to that we can then combine with something that was an earlier principle.
So I think part of the problem is that these things get forgotten, right? So it feels like a novelty because there's no continuity connecting back to that idea, right? So like maybe in some academic circle or something, it's connected, but in industry, in the zeitgeist of our conversations, it's lost. And then there's also novelty introduced in the agile conversation because, oh, like these are those principles, but now we're applying them to software, right? Or then when you get to DevOps, it's okay, the same principles, but now we have to account for operations, that the running of the software. And so there's definitely a evolution that makes applying those principles to the new thing a novelty, but the principles are the same.
Yeah, I feel like we're in this perpetual circle of like sales and marketing where it's like people come up with this idea and then you get like the snake oil salesman that latch onto it. It's the buzzword and they sell it. And everyone's like, all right, well, they've ruined that. Let's come up with a new word for the same thing to try to differentiate. And I feel like that happens over and over again. And I definitely felt that way with Agile a few years ago when I really started digging deep into DevOps. And I was like, finally, a different term that everybody can agree on. And that was also a mistake because there's no body that says this is what DevOps is. And it's also misunderstood.
So I think the problem with this, and I definitely went through this in my own Agile journey and then, viscerally experienced it with the DevOps is so I want to come back to one thing you just said, but there's a reason this sort of happens, which is once it becomes this legitimized term, then everyone wants to sell under that banner, and marketing kind of ruins
Yeah.
it for everyone.
Yeah.
So, whoa, we got to be DevOps now because like that's what the thing is, and then now it's like a new thing, and like everyone's AI washing or open source washing, whatever their marketing is, even though it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take it back though, because I really enjoyed our initial topic and I realized I might have derailed us a little bit. And I really loved learning about that. Just like Brad, I didn't really understand the term. I had a guess of what it was. And I do think that, we were also talking about like learning organizations before we started. And to me, there is that balance between the technical and the social networks that support the development of more complex technologies to solve customer problems. And it stung a little bit, actually, when you said that if there's coaches out there who emphasize the socio side a little bit too much, because I'm like, I think that might be me. So I want to understand that part a little bit more. And I'm very open to learning. So I'm not pointing that out as a criticism or anything like that.
There's a lot in what you just said to unpack. So if you kind of have this model of socio and technical, then the behaviors and beliefs sort of sit on the socio side, and then you have these tools and skills that are on the technical side. And I think the point I was making is you can go all in on trying to make the socio side improvements, but if it doesn't reflect itself in improving the skills and the tools at some point, then you kind of set the upper bar. You can't get above a certain capability or performance level if you're only on the socio. And I think that's the point I was making is it's easy to say like, we're going to have these conversations, we're going to have these meetings, but there is a part of this which is just raw programming or raw like technical things. If you want to get technical outcomes, you need to invest in that technical capability as well.
Yeah.
And again, this is a nuanced thing, and I don't necessarily want to drag everyone through the rabbit hole here, but there's literature that calls things organizational learning, and then other literature that calls learning organization. From our perspective, they're almost indistinguishable. But the point I would make is there's this tendency to kind of collect vocabulary and not really change behaviors. And I would argue you never learned until you change the behaviors. And a learning organization or organizational learning, depending on how we want to frame it, is about the capability of you as an organization or us as an organization to take new information and manifest new behaviors. And I really got into the organizational learning research when I started, in the middle of that story, when I was doing DevOpsy, Agile type consulting, I got frustrated with this cycle where you give organizations the same training, the same ideas, and they look very similar size and shape, but they get very drastic difference in their ability to change. And what I came to recognize is that they, for a variety of reasons, and we can start to go into those. I don't know if we have the rest of the day, but some organizations have things that make it hard for them to change. And the reasons those are, some are socio, some are technical, whatever. If you get new information, but you didn't change your behavior, then you didn't learn. You got exposed to an idea, that's cool, but it's just trivia for you.
Yeah, that reminds me of some stuff that I used to say over and over again to my team of consultants at my last job is if they're not ready to pick up the tool or learn the practice or do a thing, I usually think of theory of constraints from Goldratt, and I say the constraint isn't this thing that you're wanting them to do, it's their understanding of the importance of that thing. And so don't die on this hill now. Now you know the thing that I need to work on is this person's understanding of this. And maybe you need to do things that are less effective in the time being, right? Because they're not our one bottleneck, to build up that relationship with that person so they trust you to give it a try.
So there's a saying by this guy Gurdjieff, he's kind of a modern mystic, and it doesn't matter like his whole story, but I like this quote because I think it applies to the scenario, which is he says, if you tell someone a truth that they're not ready for, it's worse than lying.
A lot to unpack there, but I like it.
Yeah, that's
like they can't conceive of this truth, and you're telling them, and it's like all you're doing is hurting them.
And the other challenge that I typically see is like knowledge isn't understanding. And this is my complaint with the certification complex that we have today, is that we empower people with words. I think this aligns with what you're saying, Andrew, but they don't truly understand the meaning behind those or the principles, the values behind the practices that they're doing. And so it falls flat.
The metaphor I like for this, which not everyone necessarily will appreciate, but I did some martial arts in my life, and I feel like if you just do the moves, but you're not used to doing it on someone who's trying to hurt you, then like the moves, like you could do the move, but it's not real yet. You can't actualize it in the context that it matters.
Yeah, that reminds me of Chaos Monkey and Chaos Gorilla, right? Is the act of actually responding to a real world bug that has the ability to actually affect production.
Deliberately
responding to that is like, yeah.
Right.
Well, but it's responding to an actual attacker, whether it's self-inflicted or not, as opposed to just like responding to the training dummy that's hanging on the wall.
Yeah. Most organizations are not ready for chaos engineering, but
no.
They need consistency monkey before they need to worry about chaos monkey.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Where I was going with the verbiage thing, though, and I admittedly lost my train of thought partway through, was that I think what's missing in consultants or coaches or managers or whoever it is that's trying to instill these new behaviors is the skill set to do the transition. How do I get from point A to point B?
I think you're right, but I also think there's a couple levels to the game. So one of the things that we mentioned is also part of the problem with some of the consulting industrial complex or certification industrial complex is you have a bunch of certified people that are not really capable of doing some of the skills, right? They have the vocabulary, they saw the like exercise in the book, but they didn't have the lived experience of actually delivering software with a high performing team. And then I think this is another thing that organizations struggle with because, and obviously there's been some attempts to address this, but the organizational levels, like a lot of the agile as espoused is really at this kind of like team level, single team level value stream. And it's not very thoughtful about how the complexity of value has to come together across a bunch of other things. And that gets even more exacerbated when you start to throw in all these other considerations with regulations or cyber physical systems or, like where it has to meet this other reality. And like the agile purism just kind of falls apart, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that Scrum works really well in practice for startups. I think that when you start to think about enterprise-sized companies, like you could have pockets of Scrum, but until the organization is able to think about in terms of business agility, that Scrum team is only going to be able to be so effective.
This was one of the insights going back to the sociotechnical commentary from Trist is that if you didn't have the organization adjusting to be in alignment with this new way of working, then the old way of working will just reinstate itself at some point. So like it didn't kind of like to be successful with the new way of working means that it gets embraced and permeates the rest of the work.
Yeah.
And that reminds me a little bit too of our conversation with Jason Little and Ken Rickard in Gall's Law, where their argument is you can't take a complex system and change it to another complex system. You have to simplify it first. And I'm still like wrapping my head around like, what does that look like for a company with 100,000 employees? Like, that's so hard. Like, how do you simplify that sort of system? And I think it's because maybe we don't always think about things appropriately. Like we haven't had the right mental model shift. It's not the word I was looking for, but we'll go with it. Paradigm shift.
In practice, it means that you sometimes need to have like a protected skunk works that can be born and get to at least adolescence before it's exposed to the rest of those animals in that jungle. Are you familiar with the Bezos memo?
I know many Bezos isms. I'm not sure if I know this particular memo.
So in certain circles, this would be the memo, but it's an email from 2002 where it starts off saying that you're going to everyone, and this is the CEO, remember, of a company saying, no one is going to interface directly with code anymore except through APIs. You basically mandated that everything was going to be service oriented, and then if you don't do this, you're fired. That was like how he closed the email.
Was not familiar with that one, that's for sure.
But that sets off, and this is why I bring that up. So that sets off this thing that leads to Amazon being what Amazon is now. But another thing that happens before EC2 is born, they took a team and they sequestered them away from the infrastructure for delivering the big web app that was making all their money to build the first version of EC2 took about 18 months. So at some level, they said, okay, like here's this future thing that we believe we can productize and make a business around, but they took them out of and there's a bunch of other stories, and they're not necessarily my stories to tell, but like people who were in these roles that were like running the infrastructure and running that website probably would have squashed EC2 if they could have. So like you need to protect the new way from the old way sometimes.
Yeah, that makes me think about too how a lot of companies grow now through acquisition. Like Microsoft comes to mind,
I mean, I
where
think that's always been the case, but certainly there's like a quickening that's happened. But yeah.
yeah, I mean, I could argue about Jack Welch changing that for the most part, but it makes me think of how like the lean startup or these large organizations were trying to teach them to go back to being like a small startup. And then to me, that begs the question of, is there value in scaling in the way that our companies scale today? Or are we thinking about scaling in the wrong way?
I mean, this is a deep question because like there's a lot of context that's missing to say yes or no, and there are certain things that are
Mm,
only possible at scale, and I think that's the scale of both the socio side and the technical side. Like you can't grow by definition without growing. So if you want to get
mm-hmm,
to these big like things, then you're going to grow. It's inevitable. But there are existence proofs of scaling, right? Like you have Amazon's one, like Google's one, like you have these big companies that have accomplished certain things. There's
mm-hmm,
also an interesting thing, and this is a wager I have, but I think you're going to see $1 billion company be built between like one developer and their technical co-founder is ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your favorite LLM is. In the next few years, that will happen.
hmm.
Just the leverage you can get from some of these tools.
But you have to focus on the professional social network. Like that has to be healthy in order for scale to occur. And it has to be thought out. Like somebody has to be almost the product manager of the social network within a company.
I want to agree with you, but I see all these counterexamples that exist, right? They prove that you don't have to do that because they exist. So I think one of the things I started saying when I got frustrated with the story I was telling before is like, oh, you can tell people, you can like show people how to do this, DevOps, Agile, whatever practices, um, but they're going to be what they are, right? You get the DevOps you deserve, and at a certain point, these companies exist. You can say, oh, that's not working or that's dysfunctional, but at the same time, they're filing with the SEC every quarter and they make money, right? So like they're existing as a dysfunctional thing, and if they needed to be better because there was existential pressure to be better, they would be, but they don't need to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a given point, right? That like every organization you walk into, there's people in there who feel like we need to change to be able to achieve more. And then there's a lot of people who are like, why do we need to change? Things are working right now. But like the reality is that if you do want to be competitive in the modern age of business, right, being able to rapidly respond to change, you can't ignore the social network within your organization. It's just not. Otherwise, you're always going to be operating in a fire drill mode.
I fully agree, and I think the organizational design problem is actually difficult. Um, so if you started with a blank slate from first principles and you could kind of imagine what it looked like, then that's on its own is its own engineering or design problem. And then two, you have to overcome the inertia of what is in place and all the different selfish interests that are going to fight for their existence. And I'm always reminded of a Machiavelli quote, because I like to quote people, but Machiavelli said, there's nothing more difficult than bringing about a new order because the people that benefit from this imaginary new order are only lukewarm supporters, and the people that benefit from the existing order will fight you until they die.
Yeah, definitely a lot of truth to that for sure.
This is something that I struggle with and I've been trying to wrap my head around it a bit, and I've even considered writing more on it. We tend to think of companies as the top of the system when we're doing like systems thinking, but companies exist in a larger system. The country that they reside in, or the state, the world, humankind, and there's all these other factors. And so I look at a company like Amazon, and I'm like, they're not profitable. Like year after year, they're very rarely profitable. They have a lot of revenue, and Fortune 500 is based on revenue, not profitability. Jeff Bezos is profitable, right? He makes a ton of money. The people at the top make a ton of money, but the system they're in allows for that. It allows for them to be successful. And, I wonder, like, is it too much of a purist to be harping on, well, you need to treat people this way, and you need to do this, and you need to do that, and you need craftsmanship, when our current system doesn't necessitate that?
Along those lines, right? And what we've been talking about, what just dawned on me is that I've never seen an organizational model yet that was anything but two-dimensional. And like, if you start to think about what a three-dimensional organizational model might look like that has, intentional recursive loops built into it, right? That still kind of embraces a sense of, top and bottom, right? But in
What is the
other
third
areas,
dimension? What does the third dimension give you, or what? I'm trying to understand the model.
well, because it enables the connective tissue between the various groups. Like, I don't want to open up the ball of wax, but like SAFe talks about it in terms of like the dual operating model. And the thing is that, well, maybe it's not a dual operating model where you've got the traditional org structure here and the operational model on this side that focuses on value alignment and whatnot. But that if those two were intermeshed together, it would result in this three-dimensional model that would allow for you to exist in multiple places within the org model, depending on context and whatnot, in multiple places. And in some places you might be at the bottom, at some places you might be at the top, and at some places but I don't think we're able to think in those terms so easily.
There are a few different experiments that think about this kind of organizational liquidity. I don't know if you ever read like Chris Matz, or he used to do like a bunch of agile stuff, or there's this graphic novel they wrote called Commitment that has some of these ideas, the real options ideas. But skills with liquidity is a cool idea. I'm not sure humans are actually, like, one of the things I did a lot before is scientific visualization work, and we're not particularly good at seeing things in 3D unless we can interact with that model. So like, it's hard for us to represent anything that's not 2D. Like, we basically it's like easier for us to process 2D. So that might be one of the things that fixes it. But one of the things I like to try to do in the work that we're doing is get people to think about all these little interconnections, and that the goals, the metrics that you care about, maybe not exclusively, but that are missing from most organizations, is these inter capability metrics, right? So like, I think a lot of things get overdriven. OKRs, KPIs, whatever your favorite acronym is for having a bunch of metrics that are a single capabilities goals. But if you don't have this holistic context that takes the value stream into account, then it's really easy for you to overdrive that metric for that capability. And in many cases, you actually incentivize that behavior, right? And this is going back to, there's like Deming quotes about how if you give a manager a target, he'll destroy the company to hit his target, right? Or, like, get his bonus. So finding ways to build, and I think this is your sentiment, or like what you were trying to pull out of it, and I hope we're on the same wavelength, is like, if you get this fabric built and then reinforce it with incentives, then you're going to get better outcomes than if you just kind of leave each capability to make local optimizations for their own lifestyle.
I'm not sure I'm understanding that last part. Can you take another shot at it? Because I feel like I'm missing something that I really need to understand.
So left to their own devices, every single person in an organization has some selfish interest, right? And so you
Right.
can overlay the org chart and the funding model and how people are getting incentivized, and then you can kind of predict everything that's wrong in that organization. So taking and aligning the way people are measured and the way people are incentivized with the outcome for the whole instead of for the parts.
Okay. Yeah, I get you on that. That's actually along the lines of like I went to the Business Agility Conference 2 years ago, and what they were talking about with Roche Pharmaceutical was that one of the major shifts they did was they changed the model of how salespeople are paid. Instead of them collecting a commission based on the closure of a sale, they based it on the outcome of the value stream and the outcome that those sales then created. And they broke down their value streams by different afflictions and diseases and mapped out the technology needed to detect that specific disease or affliction, to then treat it pharmacologically, I guess, pharmaceutically. Big words, Drew. But and then also like the surgical opportunities as well. And they base those commissions then based off of the like, are we seeing quality of life go up in your geographic area for this type of affliction? Are we seeing mortality go down? And other metrics like that, as opposed to just that early hit incentive. So is that kind of like aligned with what you're describing now?
So it's like a dark art to come up with comp plans, especially comp plans for salespeople. I don't know if you've ever had to think about that, but in every organization, there's some combination of monetary and other incentives for us to do things like recognition or whatever other things people are motivated by. And so, like, get even more concrete about what you're trying to do. Like, in between a developer team and an operator team, there's certain metrics that you could be aligning on. I don't know if you're familiar with SLOs or like some of the SRE language, or getting this like kind of three-way contract in place. But if you just leave the developers to optimize for developer lifestyle and then ops to optimize for their lifestyle, then you're going to always have this tension between whoever has the political power. Because if ops has the power, they're going to say no to everything because their incentive is to keep these systems stable and like basically slow things down, go slow. And then ops is like trying to go a million miles an hour. So that's the kind of core conflict that you see between dev and ops. And you could make similar analogies between marketing and sales and product management and development, and like just go through this list of things that are core conflicts, core tensions between each of those capabilities, and then try to figure out for your context, what's the right thing to measure between these capabilities? What's the right behavior to reward for how this is going to deliver value to the mission or the goal, which in some cases the customer, but not all cases.
Lately, I've been hiring a decent amount of Scrum Masters where I'm at. And by the time you're listening to this, that'll be done. So probably done. So don't send me any resumes, but and I'm sorry we didn't meet earlier to anybody out there. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is the qualities and the attributes. And one of the major things I've arrived on is that the quality I'm looking for in a candidate is somebody who sees anti-patterns, coaching opportunities as the fuel, as opposed to, oh man, why aren't they giving me the time? Why aren't they, listening to me? Why are they being so defiant? And that they should look at that as their own personal incentive reward. If they have that self-contained within them, that they'll be less likely to flip tables. And that the incentive there is that you're only going to be here for a period of time. We're all only going to be within all of our jobs for a period of time. And the reward is that you get to take all of that with you, all of the learning around all of the various problems that you turned into opportunities, that you were able to then coach that adoption of and embracement of that different type of mindset. And so I'm starting to like think about that as part of, I know it's like everybody wants money, right? But it's also the mindset of, people are here. You want to be here with us because there's so much opportunity for you to grow your career, so much opportunity for you to improve your knowledge, your skills, your experience, right? And you get to take that with you no matter where you go, whether it's it growing here within the company or going somewhere else. So I don't know, like, how does that fit into what you've been talking about?
So there's like the individual that you're going to get these lessons, and I agree, jobs are short and careers are long. Uh, at the same time, if someone is in this conversation and they're kind of frustrated with the other side of the equation, it's usually because they didn't figure out what that other person's game is. Like what is their winning condition, and how can you help them win their game? And if you're not doing that, then you just seem like noise, right? Like you want to play your game, but you're not helping them play their game.
No. Okay.
I like that.
That's another rabbit hole. Go down the game theory rabbit hole. Like framing everything in terms of the strategies that would give whatever payoffs, and then Nash equilibriums and Pareto inefficiency. Good times.
Yeah, that I don't want to go too down that rabbit hole either. But for me personally, once I started realizing that work was just a game that I get to set up the chessboard on a daily basis and try again, I just found so much more passion in my work.
Each of the pieces on the board has agency, and they don't necessarily want to make the move you want to make.
Yeah, I also like coach that, like, as coaches, we're actually kind of like spies who are trying to destabilize an economy or a government in a good way, as opposed to in a nefarious way. But that's like another game I like to play with Scrum Masters, is to encourage them to pick an improvement item that they feel their team would benefit from at the beginning of each iteration, and see if they can convince that to be a topic in a retro without really doing anything other than just simply asking questions.
So one of the things you just said kind of connects a thread back through a bunch of stuff we already touched on, which is if you really want to improve change, that like it's inherently destabilizing. You
Yeah.
have to destabilize to get to the new state.
The way you get a pearl is by inserting a piece of sand into an oyster shell, which creates a very uncomfortable moment for a period of time. But in the end, you get a pearl.
I was thinking Satir's change model I use a lot when I'm pitching change. And it's that, right, anytime you introduce a change to status quo, you're going to hit a pit. The question is, how much disruption do you want to take on? Are you comfortable with? Can you take on?
What's the J curve that you're going to end up with, and can you get out the other side of it before the politics assert that you're not doing that experiment anymore?
Right.
If it's a game, what does it matter?
Well, it doesn't necessarily matter for me because I'm going to win
Right.
my game. But if you're trying to keep a job or you're trying to keep your organization winning some bigger thing, then it definitely matters.
Yeah, but I what I also tell people, like, with work or whatever, right, is that like when you're worrying about something that you have no control over the outcome, you're spending brain cycles on something that is not going to affect any change at all, and that you're distracting yourself from being able to look at things logically, right? And so if the worst does wind up panning out, then you're now going to have to figure out how to step away from the emotional cliff to be able to address it with a sound frame of mind. And so when I think about, like, if you approach it as a game, it reduces the stress and anxiety around of what might happen if things go wrong. And you're now able to get those brain cycles back to apply it to, how do we make this go right?
Don't attach your ego or your emotions to the outcome is my advice.
Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. that gets back to me, right? When you said that there's some coaches who spend more time in the socio side of things. That's my power. Like, I've never been a developer. I always wanted to be one. I always felt like I was missing out, but was maybe too far into my career to really like learn enough about that. And that's why my brain is really good at helping to support people and listening and observing and helping to create awareness, right? For me, I don't know that I have the ability to impact the technical side of things without focusing through the lens of the social side of things.
That's fair. And one of the things that I've talked about, and Jabe's talked about this a lot too, is that there's kind of a missing technical agile coach in a lot of court cases, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you talk about, like we're going to get these meetings, we're going to have these people get on the same page, but you're not able to get to another level of performance if you don't have that flow of information that's also related to the tools and the technology. And
Yeah.
like up leveling the skills will pay dividends as much as having like a stand up.
That's literally what my presentation Friday in Indianapolis is about.
Tell us about it.
I mean, it's one I've given multiple times. It's essentially exactly what you said, Andrew. It's that we implement these frameworks like Scrum or Safe, and then we're like, I did the thing. Why am I not seeing the results? And we're not changing how we're coding. Right? So you can't just take a monolithic system and go, oh, now you can release in 2 weeks. And the developers are like, no, I can't. And you're like, Amazon does it, figure it out.
Yeah, that's on the truth people aren't ready to hear. And you're inflicting damage in some cases if you try to force that issue.
But what model like out there really actually like prohibits somebody from hiring like a DevOps coach or somebody from hiring a test automation coach? Why wouldn't we be able to do that?
I don't think anything prohibits it. You just, in practice, you don't see it happening. And it's a chicken and egg thing too, because there's not a lot of those available either.
Yeah. We have one person that we brought on recently where I'm at who's a transformation coach, and we brought them on specifically to coach the area of the organization that's focusing on CI/CD, which at first I was like, well, we also need somebody to be focusing on, like we have a gap in that specific area of a coach who's actually focusing on the socio side of things, which is, I think, causing a bit of a problem. We got to kind of figure out how to support that part of it as well.
The pendulum swings. You gotta get it back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very rare you have someone that can do everything. You really need a team of coaches for the most part, from what I've seen. There's a few people. Andrew might be one of them, and I'm super jealous. I think of like Industrial Logic. That company tends to do that as well. They're a more holistic type of consultant. Most places aren't that way. And even myself, I know like medium level technical stuff. And like I can copy and paste scripts off of Stack Overflow, but I'm not the person that you want teaching your developers how to actually build this stuff.
That's a fair point, and I kind of want to go back to connect to something Drew just said. I think you'd be shocked what you can accomplish if you really try to do that with like Cursor or Claude or ChatGPT directly. Just like if you want to be making code happen in 2024 with free tools, you can do incredible things. And if you can afford the $20 a month or whatever, then you can get even better models. But if you can express intentions clearly, like here's something I believe is happening. Every assumption that we have, and some of them they're explicit and some of them are unstated, and in this conversation that we had today, like it's all going to be reconfigured in the next couple of years. from the tools that are emerging right now. And if you really want to make code, by the end of the week, you spend like a few hours, like you can make stuff happen.
Yeah, and I want to point out, Drew constantly talks about how he can't code, but he stood up our website. Right? Like he didn't code for it, but he's got a technological edge. And at the end of the day, does it work? Right? Like that's our measure.
I mean, I have a server with Docker installed, and I have different containers run, and I've set up automation between them. But I'm not like writing an API, or I'm not like hand coding anything that is creating that automation. I'm using the functionality within it. I know enough how to like set permissions that tend to break and drive me nuts every now and then, but I don't know enough to like log into a server, set up an environment, and
I think this kind of goes back to the comment about organizations, but it's on the individual level. Like you don't need to, right? If you needed to, you would. The only reason I have any technical skill is because I once upon a time decided I need to solve a technical problem, or someone made it my job. I was incentivized to solve that technical problem. And then by the end of solving that problem, you have a new skill. There's another, I don't think we have time today, but I really like the metaphor of language acquisition and applying that to like these technical skills. And one of the things that comes from researching language acquisition is that you'll only get fluency in a language to the level of your necessity. So similar to how if organizations need to be better, they would. If Drew needed to solve a technical problem, like you have Google, Stack Overflow, and ChatGPT for free, and you need to, you will do it. I guarantee it.
yeah.
So like my advice to a lot of people is like, you want to learn how to code, you have the whole of the internet at your disposal, and you just need to figure out a problem. Like you need to find an app that you have to make, and then you make it. And when you're done with that, like you'll know everything that it takes to make that app.
That circles back to we build technology for people comment, but
in that case, the person is yourself.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, last I checked, I was a person. I haven't
There
been
you
taken over
go.
by AI yet.
Are you sure?
I don't know. Let me click a few squares, find the
Yeah.
buses.
Find the bridges.
I feel like I get bikes and crosswalks lately.
The helping train the AIs.
That's my suspicion. I'm teaching the AI, and that's why it keeps getting harder.
Yeah.
I
you're doing
had
it
this conspiracy theory about 10 years ago when we were clicking the boxes that had the bus or the motorcycle or the bridges or whatever, that we were teaching computers how to spot different types of objects, and that as an added benefit, it helped us figure out if we were human or not, but that the real business model was to create systems that can self-identify buses, bridges, and motorcycles.
At this point, you can get agents that are pretty good at the captchas too. So, like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally what I did like 10 years ago with machine learning, taking pictures of labels and setting a tolerance. This is good, this is bad, and doing it over and over and over and over again. So reCAPTCHA's got to get in the AI game or the ML game at least.
Not hot dog.
but to close this off, like if you haven't played with the tools to make code, you'd be surprised what you can accomplish.
I haven't yet. Like my big revelation about maybe 3 or 4 months ago was that my initial prompt with ChatGPT should tell it who I wanted it to be, right? Like, I want you to be a graphic designer that also has a ton of experience in this. And, so I have not yet, like, even if I could get ChatGPT to create code, I wouldn't specifically know how to take it from ChatGPT and put it into an environment, right? Like, that's just I guess I could use ChatGPT to tell me how to do that.
Drew, if you needed to, Drew, I believe in you. Like if you need it in your heart, like you already got Docker running, you got the server running, like you can do it.
Yeah. I don't think I have a need for it right now. But
so this is another thing that I'm really fascinated with. So this all started, I won't give you the whole paper, but I can send a link to it. But there's like this Chinese group that was researching using AI tools to solve competitive coding problems. And the conclusion was that the non-experts, they weren't non-programmers, but they were not necessarily good at these hard computing problems. They could be as good as the experts with the tools, and the experts could be even better, but it was predicated on task decomposition strategies. And then, which I think is like really interesting, because in my mental model, nonlinear brain, if you squint and look through the lines, then the task decomposition strategies are very similar to what you do if you're doing like a TDD. So you have some problem and you're breaking it down into these incremental things, and you need to be able to decompose it, and then you need to be able to check that it actually works and like kind of put it back together. And then I also got into this like, oh, it's all about task decomposition. Like everything to do with the flow of value through a system is about being thoughtful about the task decomposition and how it maps onto that socio fabric. And that's just like, now we have these tools that can help us, one, do the task, two, maybe decompose it, and it's going to get even crazier. And it's emergent right now, but if anyone's listening to this and you haven't tried to make code happen with ChatGPT, or pick one, Claude's supposedly the best, Claude 3.5 is supposedly the best for code right now, like just go do it. It'll change your life, and don't be afraid that AI will take your job, but someone using AI might.
And I agree with that task breakdown thing. That's the other thing that I touch on in that talk on Friday. That will be, in the past by the time this airs, is that these things that we apply to technology, good coding practices, are the same things we're applying to organizations. It's just the lens that you're looking at.
If you take this big thing and say, oh, I want this app to exist, and you just see it as this big monolithic thing, then it's hard. It's hard to reason about. It's hard to make. And if you ask the LLM, hey, solve this problem, the chance that it will is low. But if you're able to break down into small pieces each of those things that need to happen and then recompose them, you're gonna get it working like every time.
Yeah, I've even noticed that with writing. Like when I write articles, I always use ChatGPT now as my editor. And if I insert a massive article, it just like trims it way down. And if I insert too small of a chunk, it will blow it way up and bloat it. And so there's like a balance there of like, what is the right amount to task it with?
What I struggle with right now is that I find that, and I don't know if it's that I'm writing my prompts wrong or whatnot, but ChatGPT suddenly turns into like a prankster toddler, where like I'll have it do like 10 specific things or something, right? And then I ask it to incorporate something else, and then there's always one thing that it like does differently, as if like it doesn't remember. I don't know what's going on here, but like, and I know this is trivial, I've been using it to create graphics to print on stickers for bar trivia teams, and it'll get it like just perfect. And then I'll say, can you make this one adjustment, right? And the next thing I know, like there's like bananas hanging in the background, and I'm like, where did that come from?
This is what I refer to as I got this from Sasha, who's on my team, but the doom loop. So these things are not really deterministic, and one of the worst things is when you get almost what you want and you kind of like ask for revisions, because you're basically pulling the arm on the slot machine. And
Yep.
when you're doing code or prose, like if you're trying to write articles, it's actually a lot easier, because you can manipulate the text level elements and kind of put them back in and adjust them. When you start doing images and video, and I played with this because we make images for like our little podcast and blog posts with the tools all the time, and you get something that you almost like, and you're like, make it like this, is like almost never does it. And you
Yeah.
get in this like weird doom loop where it's almost what you want, and then you keep doing it, and it doesn't get any better. It gets worse every time. And there's like some hilarious ones, and I'm sure we could find like a bunch online where people posted hilarious ones. But I had somewhere I was like, okay, remove these things, and then the next one would like have the things again. It's like, I removed the things. It's like, no, you didn't. What are you talking
Yes.
about?
Yeah. Yeah. Andrew and I both started laughing when you brought that up. That's what we were talking about the last time, this image you were working on. And I've had the same thing. Yeah. Images are not there yet.
It's almost there. And like, I made a wager that someone's going to build this like software with these things that make $1 million, $1 billion. I think in the next few years, someone is going to make a epic, like Marvel quality movie with these tools in their basement by themselves. Is going to be like the storytelling and the tools are going to come together, and it's going to be really compelling.
Yeah, I'm aligned with that wholeheartedly.
It'll have some cool name too, like the Kubrick or something.
I mean, at least it won't be Skibbity Toilet. I don't know if you have kids. But
I think the one thing that if you don't know this already, everybody needs to know it, is that if you ever need to write a greeting card for a birthday, holiday, or whatever that is, ChatGPT is your buddy. Save hours of time now instead of writing from my heart.
Right from ChatGPT's heart.
Yeah, I used to go into stores and I would buy 2 greeting cards, like one that had the image and the message inside that I really liked, and the other one that had what I wanted to write inside. And so I'd buy both, and I would just write down what this one said as the dear so and so, blah 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 blah. I'm just a terrible writer. That's why I have a podcast.
Is there some key component, because I know we were kind of all over the place, of
Sociotechnical
system that we completely overlooked? Were we kind of aligned with this whole time, or did we 100% derail?
I mean, I think that the answer is that it was derailed a long time ago, right? Like this is archaeology that, like we figured this out when we were trying to mine coal, right? So I'm interested in that language, and I like the idea that you can't improve the technical side without improving the socio side, or that they're kind of like a mirror, which, Drew immediately went to Conway's law, which I also think, or the mirroring hypothesis is another name for that. Like, these principles are timeless, right? Like, this goes back before Agile, before whatever. There's not a novelty necessarily. It's about, okay, like, what are the principles of getting groups of people aligned to do the right thing, or do the best thing for an outcome? And there's a bunch of things that have to do with leadership. There's a bunch of things that have to do with incentives, and those principles are timeless. And Sociotechnical Systems represents this kind of interesting historical insight that got written down, and use very similar language. It just happened to be in the 1950s coal mining, and then like no one really cared, or no one paid attention. And in fact, if you look at what happened to that particular research, it was ultimately suppressed on purpose.
Yeah, this has been a very interesting episode.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for spending your afternoon with us. You're in the future for us, or the past. You're in the past for us.
Yeah.
But
the future is now, it's just not evenly distributed, is another famous quote. So
there we go.
Come over. The water's fine. Like, let's go.
We could talk about this for probably like 3 or 4 more hours more if we were focused on it, and I didn't derail us too many times, but yeah.
I mean, what I want is for people to have better things, and the motives I had at different phases, either building tools or trying to help people, coaching, consulting type stuff. Like, at some point, I think it's hard to be a consultant if you have attached your emotions to the outcome, right? And like, I definitely went through phases where I wanted the people that I was working with to be so much better, and you do all this and you learn all that, and you kind of come back to them with all these things that would improve them. And I've literally had high level executives in, I won't even say like the number of these like Fortune whatevers, but it's like, is there some way we can do DevOps without changing anything? And you're like, well, no. Like, I mean, you get the DevOps you deserve. Like, just call it DevOps now or whatever. Call it SRE. But if you want it to be better, it looks like this. If you want to just keep doing what you're doing, then maybe you don't need to be better. Maybe what you're doing is fine for you.
I love the ego comment. I think it takes a certain amount of confidence in yourself to be able to realize that you're not going to change everything overnight. And if someone from the outside looks in or whatever, they might look and say like, hey, why aren't you doing this or that? And understanding that there's constraints and things take time.
I tilted at a few windmills in my life. Don't get me wrong. Like I tried to change things and like not everything wants to change. Not everyone wants to change.
Definitely. Cool. And then where can people find you, Andrew, if they want to learn more about you and the things you're doing and saying?
So Andrew Clay Shafer on LinkedIn. If you want to reach out on LinkedIn, I'm having conversations. I'm Little Idea on Twitter, and or whatever the artist formerly known as Twitter, I think is what it is now.
Twitter.
Yeah, something Elon Musk, blah blah blah. I don't know. I'm not hard to find, but we're trying to build like a new way of doing some of this stuff that is a little more thoughtful about how some of these problems get addressed with the organizational, like that org design comment that Drew made or Drew had earlier. Like that's really what we're talking about. But then you have to be thoughtful about the transitions. Like you can't go from the ideal thing that you want from where you are unless you get that transition, and getting the buy-in is like part of the thing. So, and we're huge fans of all these people that we talked about today, right? So Ellie Goldratt and the theory of constraints and Deming and the rest of that. So half of our time is reading all these giants and trying to synthesize where their insights were right and timely, and then where the world's changed. Like I think that there are things that are happening. You know, some of them we just talked about with the movement to software as a service, the operational burden that has to be accounted for. A lot of organizations are focused on delivering software, but they like operations is almost an unfunded mandate. So then, you know, you can agile till it gets to the servers, and then it's like someone else's problem, and that's kind of where the DevOps stuff got born, because like we should probably keep these servers running because there's no value stream if they're down. Like there's none. So that's critical. I'm out. I'm going to conferences quite a bit. I just got back from talking at Tampa Bay DevOps days and the Dallas DevOps days. So I love to think about this stuff. I love to talk about this stuff. And if anyone wants to reach out on LinkedIn, I'm happy to tell you more about my ideas.
You mentioned your podcast. What's your podcast?
So we haven't really put it on podcast, but we've been streaming video onto LinkedIn and YouTube and on X, I guess, the artist formerly known as Twitter. That we just do me and Sasha and Jabe talking about some of these ideas. We talk about sociotechnical systems. We talk about talk about metrics. We're also writing a book right now, which is going to be fun. Which we'll try to promote that a little more when it's like we're gonna have like chapters before we go all the way to publishing it. But that's also exciting.
That's cool. Great. I think we spoke to a future giant just today.
I mean, like I said, I stumbled or fell out of the tree and like landed on the shoulders, I think is how it happened. And then I feel, if I'm being honest, like I have certain things that I see very clearly and I just say them out loud, and then everyone's like, that's so interesting. I'm like, that was so obvious. And then I was just lucky enough to be in the right place, to be in front of people saying the thing that need to be said at the time, and you know, whatever that benefits people I'll take some credit for, but it's really the same principles, like these timeless principles. I was early days, I was influenced by Alistair Coburn, and I was really influenced by Deming. If you don't know the 14 points from Deming, or Senghi is another one. Like these are the ideas, and it's just about getting people enough of like, maybe the right word is courage to go do it for real, and then take whatever comes from that. But have faith in your fate.
Couldn't agree more.
I enjoyed this a lot, so thank you for setting aside the time for sure.
It was a pleasure, and thanks for having me.